Olivia Hartwell stood in the middle of her Manhattan penthouse, checking her diamond watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Everything had to be perfect tonight. 300 of the city's wealthiest people would be walking through her doors in less than 2 hours, and she needed this charity gala to go off without a single hitch. The caterers rushed around her massive living room, setting up tables with white silk tablecloths. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting dancing lights across the marble floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed off the glittering New York skyline, worth every penny of the view. Olivia had spent 40 years building her real estate empire from nothing, and nights like these reminded everyone just how far she'd climbed. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. The pianist had canceled. Some excuse about a family emergency. Olivia's jaw tightened. She'd paid top dollar for a professional musician, and now, 2 hours before her guests arrived, she had nothing but silence where elegant music should fill the air. Mrs. Hartwell? Her housekeeper, Rita, appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. The older woman had worked for Olivia for nearly 15 years, quietly cleaning, cooking, and keeping the penthouse running smoothly. "Is everything all right?" The pianist canceled, Olivia said sharply, already scrolling through her contacts. "I need to find someone immediately." Rita hesitated, glancing back toward the kitchen. "Well, ma'am, my son Miguel is here helping me with the prep work. He plays piano. He could—" "Your son?" Olivia looked up, one perfectly shaped eyebrow raised. She vaguely remembered seeing a teenage boy sitting at Rita's kitchen table once years ago, when she'd stopped by Rita's apartment to drop off a forgotten paycheck. There'd been an old beaten-up piano against the wall. "Does he know anything proper?" "I can't have someone banging out chopsticks at a charity gala." "He's really very good, ma'am," Rita said quietly. "He's been playing since he was small." Olivia checked her watch again. She didn't have time to audition someone properly, and calling another professional at this hour would be nearly impossible. "Fine, tell him to play background music. Nothing loud, nothing that draws attention, just pleasant ambiance, and make sure he dresses appropriately. Does he have a suit?" "I'll make sure he looks presentable," Rita promised, hurrying back to the kitchen. 20 minutes later, Miguel walked into the living room, and Olivia barely glanced at him. He was 17, tall and thin, wearing a white button-down shirt that looked slightly too big and black pants that were clearly borrowed. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he carried himself with a nervous stillness, like someone trying to take up as little space as possible. "Sit there," Olivia gestured toward the Steinway grand piano that dominated one corner of the room. She'd bought it 5 years ago because it looked elegant, a statement piece that said she had culture and refinement. Honestly, she couldn't remember the last time anyone had actually played it. Miguel walked to the piano bench, his worn sneakers silent on the marble floor. He sat down carefully, adjusting the bench, his hands hovering over the keys like he was greeting an old friend. "Something classical," Olivia instructed, already turning away. "Mozart, Beethoven, whatever. Just keep it in the background. You're not the entertainment, you're ambiance." She walked away before he could respond, barking orders at the caterers about the champagne setup. The first guest would arrive any moment, and she had 1,000 details to manage. Behind her, Miguel took a breath and placed his fingers on the keys. The first notes were soft, tentative. Guests began arriving, handing off coats and accepting champagne flutes from servers. Conversations filled the air, laughter and networking, the sound of wealth and power mixing together. Most people didn't even notice the young man at the piano. Olivia stood near the entrance, greeting arrivals with practiced grace. A tech billionaire, a Broadway producer, the wife of a hedge fund manager. She shook hands, air-kissed cheeks, and guided everyone toward the donation table where the real purpose of the evening waited. But then something shifted in the music. Miguel's playing had started simple, almost timid. But now his fingers moved faster, surer, dancing across the keys with growing confidence. The melody transformed into something nobody expected. It wasn't Mozart or Beethoven. It was original, raw, and achingly beautiful. A woman near the piano stopped mid-sentence, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Then another guest turned, frowning in confusion. The melody climbed higher, building with emotion that seemed to pull at something deep inside anyone listening. Conversations began to fade. People drifted toward the piano without quite realizing they were moving. Miguel's eyes were closed now, his whole body swaying slightly as his hands flew across the keys. The music poured out of him like water from a broken dam, years of feeling compressed into every note. It was pain and hope mixed together. It was the sound of someone who'd seen beautiful things from a distance and dreamed of touching them. It was lonely nights and tired mornings and wishes whispered into darkness. It was everything Miguel had never been allowed to say out loud, translated into a language everyone could understand. The room fell completely silent except for the piano. 300 wealthy people stood frozen, captivated by a 17-year-old in borrowed pants and worn sneakers. In the kitchen, Rita pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She'd heard her son practice countless times on his cheap electric keyboard with half the keys broken. But this was different. This was Miguel set free, playing an instrument that could finally match what he carried inside him. Olivia noticed the silence and turned from her conversation with a donor. Her irritation flashed first. Why had everyone stopped talking? This was supposed to be background music, not a concert. But then she saw the faces of her guests, saw the way they stared at Miguel with expressions of wonder and disbelief. She frowned, listening for the first time. It was impressive, she supposed. Technically proficient. The boy had some skill, but everyone was overreacting. He was just playing piano, doing what she'd told him to do. The final notes hung in the air like something fragile and precious. When Miguel's hands finally lifted from the keys, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the room erupted in applause. Not polite charity gala clapping, but genuine thunderous applause. Miguel opened his eyes, looking startled and almost frightened by the attention. He stood quickly, gave an awkward half-bow, and practically fled toward the kitchen where his mother waited. The guests buzzed with excitement, already pulling out phones, asking each other if anyone knew who that pianist was. Olivia watched them, her smile tight and controlled, but inside she felt something cold settle in her chest. This was her night. Her charity, her event, and somehow her housekeeper's son had just stolen the attention of every person in the room. She smoothed her dress and turned back to her guests, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. Wonderful, wasn't he? Now let's talk about tonight's cause. But even as she spoke, she could see phones coming out, cameras pointing toward the piano, people recording and texting and sharing something they clearly thought was extraordinary. Olivia Hartwell had spent 40 years making sure she was always the most important person in any room. Tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't, and she had no idea that by morning, that 15-minute piano performance would change everything. Miguel woke up to his phone buzzing nonstop. He grabbed it from his nightstand, squinting at the bright screen in the darkness of his tiny bedroom. 53 notifications, then 67. Then the number just kept climbing. His heart pounded as he opened the first message. It was from a classmate he barely knew. "Dude, is this really you?" Followed by a link. He clicked it and felt his stomach drop. There he was, sitting at that massive piano in Olivia Hartwell's penthouse. His eyes closed, completely lost in the music. The video had been posted 9 hours ago and already had 2 million views. The caption read, "Mystery pianist at NYC charity gala. Who is this kid?" Miguel sat up, his hands shaking. He scrolled through the comments. Thousands of them. "This is insane talent. Better than half the concert pianists I've seen. That composition is original. He wrote that himself. Somebody find out who he is." His mother appeared in his doorway, still in her nightgown, her face pale. "Miguel, people keep calling me. Friends from church, neighbors, everyone. They're all asking if it's really you in these videos. Mom, I don't understand. I just played piano like Mrs. Hartwell told me to." Rita sat down on the edge of his bed, her hands twisted together. "There are 5 different videos now. They're everywhere. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. People are sharing them like crazy." Miguel clicked on another video. This one was shot from a different angle, closer up. You could see his face more clearly, see the emotion in his expression as he played. 3.8 million views. Posted 7 hours ago, his phone rang. An unknown number. He stared at it until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again. Different number. "Don't answer," Rita said quickly. "We don't know who these people are." But the calls kept coming. Text messages from numbers he didn't recognize. "Is this Miguel Torres? We'd love to interview you. Can we talk about your music?" By 7 in the morning, Miguel had stopped counting the views. The main video had hit 10 million. Classical music websites were writing articles. Prodigy discovered at Manhattan Gala. Teen pianist stuns elite crowd. Who is the mystery musician? Rita's phone rang. She looked at the caller ID and her face went even paler. It's Mrs. Hartwell, she answered with trembling hands. Hello? Yes, ma'am. I understand. Yes. I'm so sorry. We didn't mean for any of this to happen. Yes, ma'am. Right away. She hung up and looked at Miguel with fear in her eyes. She wants to see us, both of us, at her office in 1 hour. The elevator ride up to Olivia's office felt like the longest 60 seconds of Miguel's life. He'd never been to his mother's workplace during business hours. The building was all glass and steel, modern and cold. Everyone wore expensive suits and moved with purpose. Olivia's assistant led them to a conference room with a view of the city that probably cost more than their apartment building. Olivia walked in 3 minutes later, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She didn't sit down. Do you have any idea what you've done? Her voice was controlled, but Miguel could hear the anger underneath. My phone has been ringing since 6 this morning. Journalists, music reporters. People asking me how I discovered you, as if I'd been hiding some secret prodigy in my kitchen. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm so sorry, Rita started, but Olivia held up one hand. This was supposed to be about the charity, about raising money for children's literacy programs. Instead, every single article this morning is about the mysterious pianist. My event has become background noise to your son's viral moment. Miguel found his voice, though it came out quieter than he intended. I just played like you told me to. I didn't ask anyone to record it. You played to get attention, Olivia snapped. You knew exactly what you were doing, showing off like that. That's not fair, Miguel said, surprising himself with his own boldness. You told me to play. I played the only way I know how. Olivia's eyes narrowed. The only way you know how. Rita, how long has he been taking lessons? Which academy? Rita looked down at her hands. No academy, ma'am. He taught himself mostly. There was a retired teacher in our building who gave him some lessons for very cheap, but she passed away 3 years ago. Taught himself? Olivia repeated, like the words didn't make sense. I got a keyboard at a thrift store when I was 7, Miguel said. It was missing some keys, but it worked. I watched videos online, read library books about music theory, practiced whenever I could. Something flickered across Olivia's face, but she pushed it away. Well, regardless of how you learned, this situation is unacceptable. It makes me look foolish, like I didn't even know who was in my own home. Rita stood up suddenly, her voice stronger than Miguel had ever heard it. With respect, ma'am, you didn't know. You've never asked about Miguel. Not once in 15 years. You didn't know he got accepted to Juilliard 3 years ago. The words hung in the air like a bomb. What? Olivia said slowly. Miguel closed his eyes. He hadn't wanted this to come out. It doesn't matter. I couldn't go anyway. Juilliard's pre-college program, Rita continued, tears forming in her eyes now. Full scholarship for tuition, but I couldn't afford to stop working weekends to take him. And there were other costs. Books, supplies, travel. We barely make rent as it is. Olivia sat down for the first time, something shifting in her expression. He was also invited to compete in the Van Cliburn Junior competition 2 years ago, Rita said. But the application fee was $200 and we needed professional recordings. We couldn't afford either one. Miguel wished the floor would open up and swallow him. He'd never wanted his mother to tell anyone these things. They felt like failures, like proof that he wasn't good enough to make it work. All those nights I thought you were sleeping, Rita said, turning to Miguel. You were wearing headphones, practicing on that broken keyboard until 2, 3 in the morning. Your fingers would be sore from the keys that stuck. Mom, stop, Miguel whispered. But she couldn't stop now. 15 years of biting her tongue, of watching her son's talent grow in the shadows while she scrubbed toilets and served champagne to people who looked through her like she was invisible. 2 years ago, he wrote you a note, Rita said to Olivia. Do you remember? He asked if maybe when you were traveling, he could practice on your piano. Just sometimes. He promised to be so careful. Olivia's face went very still. You told me the piano wasn't a toy. That you found the request presumptuous. Miguel remembered that day so clearly. He'd spent hours working up the courage to write that note, choosing every word carefully. He'd imagined it like a scene from a movie where someone recognizes talent and gives a kid a chance. Instead, his mother had come home that night and told him gently that it wasn't going to happen. She'd tried to hide how the rejection had hurt her too. That piano, Rita continued, her voice breaking, sits there gathering dust except for parties. Miguel's keyboard has 6 keys that don't work. He's been composing entire pieces in his head because he can't even play them properly until he gets access to a real piano at the community center. And they only let him have 30 minutes once a week because so many kids want to use it. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic far below. Olivia stood up and walked to the window, her back to them. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded different, smaller somehow. I need to think about how to handle this situation. The media attention, the public relations aspect. She turned around, her professional mask back in place. Rita, take the rest of the day off. Paid. Both of you go home and don't speak to any reporters. I'll have my team draft a statement. In the elevator going down, Miguel looked at his mother. Are you going to lose your job? Rita pulled him close, kissing the top of his head like she used to when he was small. I don't know, baby. But I'm not sorry I said those things. Not anymore. Miguel's phone buzzed again. Another notification. The videos had hit 20 million views combined. People were calling him a genius, a prodigy, the next great classical composer. But all he could think about was the look on Olivia Hartwell's face when his mother mentioned that note from 2 years ago. For just a second, before the mask came back, he'd seen something that looked almost like shame. By the next morning, the story had taken on a life of its own. It wasn't just about the music anymore. Someone had dug deeper, found out who Miguel was, where he lived, who his mother worked for, and once those pieces connected, the internet exploded in a completely different way. Billionaire's Maid has musical genius son. While Boss's $175K piano collects dust, read one headline. Rich woman denied teen access to piano, called request presumptuous. Said another. The story was everywhere. News websites, social media, morning talk shows. People weren't just amazed by Miguel's talent anymore, they were angry. The comments sections filled with thousands of furious messages. She walked past this kid for years and never saw him. That piano cost more than most people make in 3 years, and she treats it like furniture. This is everything wrong with wealth inequality in one story. Miguel sat on the worn couch in their apartment, his mother beside him, both of them staring at her phone in disbelief. The view count had passed 50 million across all videos. News crews had shown up outside their building. Their landlord had called twice asking them not to do interviews in the hallway. How did they find out about the note? Miguel asked quietly. About Juilliard? Rita shook her head. Someone must have been at that meeting. Maybe her assistant heard through the door. I don't know. Miguel's phone buzzed with another message. This one was from a verified account. A famous concert pianist he'd admired for years. Your performance moved me to tears. I'd be honored to mentor you if you're interested. No cost ever. Another message came through. A music school in Boston offering a full scholarship, room and board included, money for his mother so she wouldn't have to work as much. Then another from a classical music festival, then a recording studio in Los Angeles. Miguel, look at this, Rita whispered, showing him an article. A renowned composer had written an essay about Miguel's performance, analyzing the piece he'd played. The composer called it hauntingly mature, and said the composition showed a depth of emotional understanding rare in someone twice his age. But beneath all the opportunities and praise, there was something else growing. A wave of public anger directed at one person. Olivia Hartwell. Someone had created a hashtag. Let him play. It was trending #1 worldwide. People were sharing their own stories of being overlooked, of having wealthy employers or bosses who never saw them as fully human. Miguel's story had become a symbol of something much bigger than one teenager and one piano. Olivia Hartwell represents everything wrong with the wealthy elite. wrote one journalist in a major newspaper. She employed this boy's mother for 15 years and never once asked about her son's dreams. She owned a piano worth more than most families' annual income and refused to let a talented child touch it. This isn't just about music. It's about dignity, about seeing the humanity in people who serve you. Across town, Olivia sat in her office conference room surrounded by her crisis management team. 5 people in expensive suits, all talking at once. "We need to issue a statement immediately," said her head of PR. "Donate to music education programs," suggested another. "Show you care about youth access to arts. Maybe arrange a photo op with the kid," someone else added. "Shake hands, smile, move forward." Olivia listened to them strategize, feeling strangely detached. Her phone kept lighting up with texts. Business partners expressing concern about her reputation. Charity organizations asking for statements. Even her accountant had called to say that 3 clients had dropped her firm specifically because they didn't want to be associated with her name right now. But what bothered her most was the text from her daughter, Sophie. They hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, not since Sophie had called her out for missing her college graduation because of a business meeting. The text was simple and devastating. "Mom, I just watched the video of that kid playing piano. Then I read about how you treated him and his mother. I want to be surprised, but I'm not. This is who you've always been. You never saw people just what they could do for you. I'm ashamed." Olivia set her phone down and looked at her team. "Stop," she said quietly. They all turned to her. "I don't want a statement. I don't want a photo op. Everyone leave. I need to think. Mrs. Hartwell, every hour we wait." "This gets worse," her PR person protested. "I said leave." When they were gone, Olivia walked to her office window and looked out at the city she'd conquered. She'd spent 40 years climbing, building, proving herself. Her father had been a construction worker who'd died in an accident when she was 12. Her mother had cleaned houses to keep food on the table. Olivia had sworn she'd never be poor again, never be invisible again, never be the person someone looked through instead of at. And somehow, she'd become exactly the type of person who used to look through her mother. She thought about Rita, who'd worked for her for 15 years. What did she actually know about the woman? She knew Rita was reliable, quiet, kept the penthouse spotless. She knew Rita had a son because she'd seen him once or twice over the years. But had she ever asked Rita about her life? Her dreams? Her struggles? Olivia pulled out her phone and did something she never did. She Googled herself with Miguel's name. The results were brutal, article after article painting her as the villain in a modern fairy tale. But one piece stood out. It was an opinion column titled, "The Piano That Forgot Its Purpose." She read it slowly. Olivia Hartwell bought a Steinway grand piano for $175,000, the writer said. But she didn't buy it to make music. She bought it to prove she could. The piano became a status symbol, a piece of expensive furniture that said, "I have arrived." Meanwhile, a boy with genuine talent and passion practiced on a broken keyboard with keys that stuck, dreaming of touching an instrument that could match what he heard in his head. The tragedy isn't just that Miguel Torres couldn't access the piano. It's that the piano couldn't access its own purpose. A musical instrument that makes no music is just an expensive coffin for silent dreams. And maybe that's true for people too. Olivia read the last line 3 times. She thought about her life, her massive penthouse, her successful business, her carefully curated image. When was the last time she'd done something that matched her own purpose? When was the last time she'd felt truly alive instead of just successful? Her phone buzzed. Another business partner sending a concerned message. She ignored it. Instead, she thought about her father. He'd loved music. Used to whistle while he worked. Said it made the hard days easier. After he died, her mother had sold his old guitar to pay for his funeral. Olivia remembered crying about that, being angry they couldn't keep it. Her mother had explained that objects don't matter. What matters is what we do with what we have while we have it. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She walked through her penthouse in the darkness, her bare feet cold on the marble floors. She stopped at the piano, running her fingers across the perfect black surface. When had she last heard it played before Miguel's performance? She couldn't remember. She sat down on the bench and pressed one key. A single note rang out in the silent apartment, pure and clear. She pressed another. She didn't know how to play, had never learned. But even she could tell this was an extraordinary instrument, capable of extraordinary beauty, wasted. sitting silent while a kid with actual talent practiced on broken keys in a cramped apartment across town. She pulled out her phone and opened her email. Her PR team had sent her a draft statement, the kind of carefully worded non-apology that admitted nothing but sounded sympathetic. She deleted it without reading past the first line. Then she opened a new message and started typing. Not to her PR team, not to her lawyers, to Rita. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. She thought about Sophie's text, about her father who'd died young doing backbreaking work, about all the people she'd stepped over or passed in her climb to the top. Finally, she started writing. No corporate speak. No careful deflection. Just the truth, raw and uncomfortable. Rita, can we talk? Just the three of us. No lawyers, no press, no games. I need to say something I should have said 15 years ago. She hit send before she could change her mind. Outside her window, the city glittered with a million lights. Somewhere out there, Miguel was probably lying awake too, his life completely changed by 15 minutes at a piano. And Olivia realized that her life had changed too, whether she wanted it to or not. The only question was what she was going to do about it. Rita stared at the message on her phone for a full minute before showing it to Miguel. They were sitting at their small kitchen table, the same table where Miguel had done his homework for years while his mother worked late shifts. The same table where they'd celebrated his acceptance to Juilliard with tears instead of champagne because they both knew he couldn't go. What do you think she wants? Miguel asked. I don't know. Rita's voice was tired. She'd barely slept in 3 days. The whole world seemed to be talking about them. About her son, about her boss. Former boss, maybe. She still didn't know if she had a job. Maybe we shouldn't go, Miguel said. Maybe she just wants to yell at us again without witnesses this time. But something in Rita's gut told her this was different. She'd worked for Olivia Hartwell for 15 years. She knew the woman's angry voice, her dismissive voice, her business voice. The message on her phone didn't sound like any of those. She typed back, "Tomorrow afternoon? We can come to your office." The response came immediately. "Not my office. Somewhere private. My penthouse, maybe? I know that's awkward given the circumstances, but I'd rather not have this conversation in public." Rita agreed and spent the next 24 hours unable to focus on anything. Miguel practiced on his keyboard, but his heart wasn't in it. Offers kept pouring in from schools, musicians, producers. His phone never stopped buzzing. But all he could think about was what Olivia Hartwell wanted to say. The next afternoon, they rode the elevator up to the penthouse in silence. Miguel's hands were shaking. Rita squeezed his shoulder as the doors opened. Olivia answered the door herself, no assistant, no staff. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, no makeup. Rita had never seen her dressed so casually. She looked smaller somehow, older, more human. "Thank you for coming," Olivia said quietly. "Please, sit." She gestured to the living room, to the same white silk couches where wealthy guests had sat during the gala. The piano sat in the corner like a silent witness. Olivia didn't sit across from them. She sat in a chair close by, leaning forward, her hands clasped together. For a long moment, she just looked at them. "I've been thinking about what you said, Rita. About the note Miguel wrote. About Juilliard. About all of it." She took a breath. "And I've been thinking about my father." Rita and Miguel exchanged a glance. In 15 years, Rita had never heard Olivia mention her father. "He was a construction worker," Olivia continued. "Died when I was 12. Accident on a job site. My mother cleaned houses after that. Rich people's houses," she smiled sadly. She was invisible to most of them. They'd talk about their problems, their lives, like she wasn't even there. Like she was part of the furniture. Miguel shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "I swore I'd never be like her. Never be invisible, never be poor, never be powerless. I built this company from nothing. I worked 80-hour weeks. I sacrificed everything. Relationships, time with my daughter, any kind of normal life. And I told myself it was worth it because I was somebody now. I mattered." Olivia's voice cracked slightly. "But somewhere along the way, I became the person who treats others like they're invisible. I became the wealthy woman who doesn't see the housekeeper as a real person with a real life and a real family. I became exactly what I hated." Rita felt tears forming but didn't wipe them away. "Miguel, when you wrote that note asking to use the piano, do you know what my first thought was?" Olivia looked directly at him. "I thought, how dare he ask for something from me? As if you were being greedy. As if you wanting to touch an instrument I never play was somehow taking something away from me. You didn't know me." Miguel said quietly. You didn't know if I'd mess it up or— That's not why I said no, Olivia interrupted. I said no because I didn't think of you as a person with dreams. I thought of you as the housekeeper's kid. Background noise in my important life. The words hung in the air, honest and painful. I can't change what I did, Olivia said. I can't give you back those 3 years you could have spent at Juilliard. I can't undo the competitions you missed, the opportunities lost. But I need you both to know that I'm sorry, really deeply sorry, not because my reputation is damaged or because people are angry at me. I'm sorry because I was wrong, because I should have seen you and I didn't. Rita wiped her eyes. Why are you telling us this? Because my PR team wanted me to issue a statement. Do a photo op, make a donation to some music charity and move on. And I realize that's still making this about me, still making this about fixing my image instead of acknowledging that I hurt people. Olivia stood up and walked to the piano. She touched it gently. This piano cost me $175,000. I bought it to prove I'd made it, to show people I had culture in class. But you know how many times I've played it? Never. Not once. She turned back to them. My father used to say that things are only as valuable as what you do with them. A guitar that never gets played is just wood and strings. A piano that sits silent is just expensive furniture. And a life spent accumulating things without actually living. She trailed off. Miguel stood up suddenly. What do you want from us? Nothing, Olivia said. That's the point. I don't want anything. I wanted to apologize without asking for forgiveness because I'm not sure I deserve it. And I wanted to ask what I can do that would actually help. Not what makes me feel better or look better. What would actually help you? Miguel looked at his mother, then back at Olivia. I have offers now. Schools, teachers, programs. People are being really generous. I know, Olivia said. I've seen. The world is seeing what I should have seen years ago. That you have an extraordinary gift. But Mom is still going to have to work herself to death. Miguel continued, his voice getting stronger. Even with scholarships, there are costs. And she's already exhausted all the time. Her back hurts from cleaning. Her hands hurt. She's 52 and she looks older because of how hard she works. Rita put her hand on Miguel's arm. Baby, it's okay. It's not okay, Miguel said. None of this is okay. You shouldn't have to sacrifice everything for me to have a chance. Olivia listened. Really listened. You're right, she said finally. Rita, you're still employed. Full salary, but I'm reducing your hours to part-time. You shouldn't have to choose between your health and your son's future. I can't accept charity, Rita said stiffly. It's not charity. It's me finally paying you what you're actually worth. Olivia walked back toward them. But more than that, I want to do something bigger. I've been thinking about this for 2 days straight. I want to create a scholarship fund at Juilliard. Not in my name. In my father's name. For students from working-class families. Full ride, living expenses included. Support for their families so parents don't have to choose between jobs and their kids' dreams. Miguel and Rita sat very still. I'm liquidating some properties, Olivia continued. Setting up an endowment. It'll support 20 students a year indefinitely. And I want your input, both of you, on how it should work. Because you know what barriers exist. You've lived them. Why? Rita asked. Why now? Because my daughter sent me a text saying she was ashamed of me, Olivia said, her voice breaking. And she was right to be. Because I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize who I'd become. Because I'm 58 years old and I don't want to die having built a fortune but destroyed my humanity in the process. She sat down heavily, suddenly looking exhausted. I know this doesn't fix anything. I know 20 scholarships don't make up for one kid I overlooked. But maybe it means the next Miguel doesn't have to practice on broken keys. Maybe it means the next Rita doesn't have to work 3 jobs and still watch her child's dreams slip away. Miguel walked to the piano. He stood there for a moment, then sat down at the bench. His fingers touched the keys and he began to play. Softly at first, then building. It was the same piece from the gala, but different somehow. Less desperate, more hopeful. Olivia and Rita watched him, both with tears streaming down their faces. When he finished, the apartment was silent except for the sound of the city far below. That's beautiful, Olivia whispered. What's it called? Miguel turned to look at her. I haven't named it yet. I wrote it about feeling invisible, about dreaming of things you can't reach, but maybe it needs a different name now. What would you call it? Rita asked her son. Miguel thought for a moment. Maybe the piano that learned to see. Olivia smiled through her tears. That's perfect. 1 year later, Miguel stood backstage at Carnegie Hall, adjusting his bow tie for the 5th time. His hands were sweating. Through the heavy curtain, he could hear the murmur of the crowd filling the seats. 2,000 people, all there to hear him play. You're going to wear out that tie, his mother said, reaching up to fix it properly. She was wearing a new dress, simple but elegant. Her hair done nicely. She looked different than she had a year ago. Rested. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. She smiled more easily now. What if I mess up? Miguel asked. What if my mind goes blank or my fingers freeze? Then you mess up in front of 2,000 people and you survive it, Rita said, squeezing his shoulder. But you won't. You've been ready for this your whole life. A stage manager appeared. 5 minutes, Mr. Torres. Miguel took a deep breath. His mother kissed his cheek and headed toward the audience. He watched her go, remembering all those nights she'd come home exhausted, her back aching but still asking to hear him play, still believing in him when believing seemed foolish. He peeked through the curtain. The concert hall was magnificent, all red velvet and gold trim. He spotted his mother taking her seat, and next to her, in a regular seat, not a VIP box, sat Olivia Hartwell. The past year had been strange in ways Miguel still couldn't fully process. After that meeting in the penthouse, things had changed fast. Olivia had kept her word about everything. Rita now worked 20 hours a week instead of 60, still making the same salary. She'd even gotten health insurance with actual dental coverage. The scholarship fund had launched 6 months ago, the Torres Hartwell Foundation, named after Rita's late husband and Olivia's father. 20 full-ride scholarships to Juilliard for students from working-class families, with stipends for their parents and money for instruments, books, everything needed. Miguel had helped interview the first group of recipients. Kids like him, with talent burning inside them and nowhere for it to go. But the biggest change had been the piano. Olivia had donated her Steinway to the community center in Miguel's neighborhood. Not as a publicity stunt. She'd done it quietly, just had it delivered one Tuesday morning. Now 30 kids had access to it, taking lessons from volunteers, practicing on an instrument most of them would never have been able to touch otherwise. And she'd bought Miguel his own piano, not as fancy as the Steinway, but beautiful and perfectly tuned. It sat in their apartment, which they'd moved thanks to Rita's reduced hours and better pay. 2 bedrooms now. Miguel's room was barely big enough for the bed and the piano, but he didn't care. He played it every day. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed through the hall. Please welcome to the Carnegie Hall stage pianist and composer Miguel Torres. Miguel walked out into the lights. The applause washed over him like a wave. He couldn't see the audience past the first few rows because of the spotlights, but he knew they were there. Teachers who'd believed in him, neighbors who'd heard him practice through thin walls, kids from the community center who were just starting their own musical journeys. And somewhere in that crowd, his mother and Olivia sitting side by side. He sat at the piano, a beautiful grand that made his heart race just looking at it. He adjusted the bench, flexed his fingers, and placed them on the keys. The hall went completely silent, and then he began to play. It was the piece from the gala, the one that had started everything. But he'd expanded it, developed it, turned those 15 minutes into a full 40-minute composition. He'd named it Invisible, and it told a story in 4 movements. The first movement was loneliness, the sound of dreaming alone in the dark, of wanting something so badly it hurt, of feeling like no one saw you. His fingers flew across the keys, pulling out melodies that ached with longing. The second movement was hope. Small at first, fragile, like the first time his broken keyboard had made sounds that resembled music. The melody built slowly, carefully, as if afraid to believe too much. The third movement was chaos. The viral videos, the sudden attention, the fear and confusion of having your private dreams exposed to the world. The music crashed and tumbled, notes colliding, rhythms breaking apart and reforming. And the fourth movement was transformation. Not a happy ending exactly, but something real. The melody from the first movement returned, but it was different now. Stronger, clearer, no longer alone but joined by other voices, other harmonies. It was the sound of being seen, really seen, and finding that you could see others in return. When the final note faded, Miguel sat very still, his hands resting on the keys. For a moment, nothing. Then the applause erupted, thunderous and sustained. People stood. 2,000 people on their feet, applauding not just the music but the story behind it, the journey it represented. Miguel stood and bowed, his eyes searching the crowd. He found his mother, tears streaming down her face, clapping so hard her hands had to hurt. And next to her, Olivia was standing too, applauding with everyone else, her own face wet with tears. At the reception afterward, Miguel was surrounded by people. Music critics, fellow musicians, wealthy patrons talking about commissions and future performances. But he kept looking for two specific faces. He found them near the back, talking quietly together. His mother and Olivia, two women from completely different worlds who'd somehow ended up connected by his music. "There he is," Rita said as he approached, pulling him into a fierce hug. "My baby playing Carnegie Hall." "You were extraordinary," Olivia said. "Truly extraordinary. That fourth movement, I felt like I understood what you were trying to say." "What was I trying to say?" Miguel asked, curious. Olivia smiled. "That being seen isn't just about someone looking at you. It's about learning to look back. Learning to see them too." Miguel nodded slowly. "That was exactly right." "I have something for you," Olivia said, pulling out an envelope. "It's not much, just a letter. But I wanted you to have it." Miguel opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note on simple paper, nothing fancy. "Miguel," it read. "A year ago I didn't know your name. I didn't know your dreams. I didn't know that greatness was sitting in my kitchen while I complained about trivial things. Thank you for teaching me to see again. Not just you, but everyone. My daughter and I are speaking again. I volunteer with young business owners from disadvantaged backgrounds now, actually listening to them instead of just writing checks. I'm learning that being wealthy isn't about what you own, but about what you give away, and I don't mean money. I mean attention, time, recognition of other people's humanity. You didn't just show me your talent that night. You held up a mirror, and I finally saw who I'd become. I'm trying to be better. Some days I still fail, but I'm trying. Thank you for that gift. It's worth more than any piano." Miguel folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for listening. Finally." Olivia laughed, a real laugh, not the polished social laugh he'd heard at the gala. "Better late than never, I suppose." Rita put her arms around both of them, pulling them close. "Look at us," she said. "A year ago I never could have imagined this moment." "Me neither," Olivia admitted. "But I'm grateful for it. For all of it." They stood there together, an unlikely trio connected by music and mistakes and the hard work of becoming better. Across the room, a young girl from the community center approached shyly, asking Miguel for his autograph. She told him she'd just started taking piano lessons on the donated Steinway, that he'd inspired her to try. Miguel signed her program, then knelt down to her level. "Do you practice every day?" She nodded eagerly. "Good, keep going. Even when it's hard. Even when it seems like nobody's watching. Someone is always watching, even if it's just you watching yourself. Be the person who sees your own worth, and eventually, everyone else will see it too." The girl beamed and ran back to her parents. "That was wise," Rita said to her son. "I learned it from someone who learned it the hard way," Miguel said, glancing at Olivia. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, Miguel stood at the window of the reception hall, looking out at the New York City lights. His mother came to stand beside him, and after a moment, Olivia joined them. "What are you thinking about?" Rita asked her son. "I'm thinking about that broken keyboard," Miguel said. "About practicing with headphones at 2 a.m. About that note I wrote asking to use the piano." He turned to look at both women. "I'm thinking about how close I came to giving up. How close we all came to never having this moment." "But you didn't give up," Rita said firmly. "You never gave up." "Neither did you," Miguel said, taking her hand. Olivia was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "I almost gave up on something too. On being human. On connecting with people. On believing that change was possible." She smiled sadly. "I spent 40 years building walls, and you two helped me remember how to build bridges instead." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city sparkle below. Somewhere out there, other kids were dreaming impossible dreams. Other parents were working themselves exhausted. Other people were walking past miracles without noticing. But maybe, Miguel thought, if his story could reach even one person, could help one kid get the chance he'd almost missed, then everything had been worth it. The struggle, the disappointment, the years of invisible work. Nothing is ever really invisible, he realized. It's all just waiting for the right moment to be seen. And when that moment comes, when someone finally looks closely enough to understand what they're seeing, it can change everything, for everyone involved.